2 different taxi rides. Both of them, the taxi cab broke down.
Is that right?
Yeah.
That's not surprising.
Yeah, I don't know what kind of car it was, but
it was about a 90% chance it was called a Zhiguli,
Could be.
which in Russian, which is notorious for coming off the line, not working. So the Russians go and try to start tinkering with it to fix it up because they normally didn't work.
Yeah.
Like an RV about, say, November of 2020. Where they're like, we got to get this up the line. We're missing half the parts. Just ship it.
Yeah, that's true. Little Northern Indiana reference there.
Yeah.
One of the times it broke down, the driver said, no problems or no worries, just sit there, and literally grabbed some tools from the front seat and went around, popped the hood, and started tinkering with it.
Were those just private label Yugos?
Yeah, basically. But they're Russian made instead of Yugoslavian made. They're made in Russia. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's
Crazy
cool that
times.
you had that experience. What else do you remember from that week?
So it was part of a student ambassador trip. So we would go around and meet with other, kids in different countries that are our age and talk about whatever. So I remember in that scenario, we had met with some other Russian kids and we were talking about things at the time. I don't remember a whole lot of the conversation. Obviously, it was different then than it is now. And
Did you have kids ask you for your tennis shoes, your blue jeans?
Like Billy Joel tapes?
I mean, honestly, that's what people told me before I went. I took Billy Joel tapes. I took chewing gum. I took cigarettes because they had terribly made cigarettes. And, Russians at that time, they're still heavy smokers. At that time, they were like 80% of the population smoked.
Okay.
And so you could trade for pens. Like they would give you, like, they're called baby Lenin pens and these Soviet pens. And that was what.
You say Lenin or Lenin?
Lenin, yeah.
That guy.
Yeah, that guy.
I don't remember the students asking us, but I do remember going and visiting some sites, and there were folks selling like old Russian
Hats,
military garb and stuff like that. And they would, if not for cash, they would do it some sort of a barter thing.
Yeah.
We may or may not have done some of that.
Right. Yeah. No, that was fun. I remember doing that. I still have them today. Russian hats, matryoshka dolls. The nesting, stacking
Right. Yeah.
dolls that Russia's famous for. Medals, Soviet medals. I have a collection of those, which is a little odd but interesting. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And now you can get yourself your very own previously oligarch-owned yacht for pennies on the dollar.
Exactly. Exactly.
Next trip, when you do that, let us know, and then we'll do a second podcast from the yacht.
I've been back to Russia many, many times, and now, of course, you can't go back because you don't want to get thrown in jail like some Americans who are sitting there today.
Right.
But it's the history, the culture, the people are wonderful, but unfortunately, they've got a rotten government.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll pick up some views on that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Well, I think it's a point you make, though, not necessarily the rotten part. I mean, outside of Russia, but in general, there are a lot of countries out there that I think most citizens, most of the population say the government doesn't represent us as a people and as a culture.
Right.
The government's doing their thing, right, wrong, or indifferent, and to a whole array of varying degree. But I think it's true to form that the people of a country are not necessarily the same.
Yeah, and I think you're right. And I hear all the time. So I'm lucky enough, fortunate enough to travel a lot internationally, and I often will hear, how is it possible that a country of 340 million people, that you have two 80-year-olds that are who they are, that are your choices? And I say, a lot of Americans wonder the exact same thing. How is it possible? And but to your point, I think a lot of people outside America think the same thing, and even Americans today. It's like our government is our government, but we live our lives and continue with our families and our businesses, and despite not always agreeing with what our country and our leadership is doing. Yeah.
Yep.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Industrious Podcast. Thank you all for joining us from wherever you guys get your podcasts. And if you happen to be tuning in on the Assessa YouTube channel, thank you for doing so. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already done so. Hit that little notification bell icon so you can be notified when new episodes like this very one drop. We would greatly appreciate it. We will not send you to Russia if you do so have at it. Today we got a special guest, Mr. Nathan Feltman. Nate, welcome to the Industrious Podcast.
Great to be with you guys.
Why don't you give our viewers and listeners a little background info on yourself?
Well, sure. Well, I'm a Hoosier. I grew up in Mishawaka, Indiana, and went to what I like to call the Carmel of the North high school up there, Penn High School, and enjoyed growing up in northern Indiana. But I couldn't wait to get the heck out. I remember just thinking, okay, I want to get out of here, and I was brainwashed really early by both parents who were Indiana University graduates that nice. You're going to go to IU, and when you grow up on Bobby Knight IU basketball, and you've got two parents, and not just two parents, but extended family, many of whom went to IU. I knew I applied to one school, even though I was growing up in the shadow of the Golden Dome, Notre
right.
Dame. I only applied to one school and decided.
It's the Harvard of the Midwest.
Yeah,
so
exactly. Although I'm not sure we necessarily want that comparison these days.
Well,
but
it's a little touchy these days.
That's fair.
But I loved Bloomington, of course, and had a great 4 years there, and decided to go to law school, which I did, and I went to law school in Indianapolis at the McKinney School of Law, and kind of got on my way, which was I was when I was growing up, I was very curious and just following what was happening globally, and of course in the late '80s, early '90s, it was what was happening with the Soviet Union and what might transpire, meaning the potential collapse of the Soviet Union, and so I was intrigued. Studied Russian language when I was down at IU. And then went to the Soviet Union with a group of students to study the language, Russian language, in 1990. That trip really changed my trajectory and kind of solidified what I wanted to do in my career, with my career. And continued studying Russian, graduated from law school, and then decided to go back to Russia after spending a couple summers there in 1990, 1994, and studied Russian law at a Russian law school and graduated with a master's degree in Russian law from the Russian law school, and then stayed and worked for a big international law firm called Baker & McKenzie for a couple of years, and had an amazing experience. And as an American, being in Russia in the 90s was a very, very different experience from any time before that, and of course, after kind of what's happened over the last 20 years in Russia.
This is a very loaded question, but how would you compare to at that time American law versus Russian law?
Yeah. Well, there are two very different legal systems. Yeah. So Russia is part of a civil law kind of society, and so Germany has a civil law history, and so it's very different. Meaning, civil law is not case law based. Common law, American jurisprudence is all based on case law, and so if you're going to court, you look at what the courts have previously decided. Very different in the Russian legal system or civil legal system, civil law legal system, where you basically have a judge who interprets the statutes, and that's it. And they don't look at prior cases. So very different legal system. And I, studied, they have what are called civil codes, and the civil codes, and then they have kind of the basics of law, whether it's IP law or whether it's real estate law or, Limited Liability Company Act. And you kind of drill down, and then the judge has a lot of flexibility depending on the case, which is very, very different. And in Russia, of course, the judge often has supreme flexibility and decides based on kind of what I'd call it the regime wants in terms of outcomes. So it's a very different system.
Sounds like a secondary income for judges.
It has been, no doubt about it. No doubt about it, has been, and I think probably continues to this day. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you start working for a big firm in Chicago. Were you based in Chicago?
I was based in Moscow.
Oh,
so
okay.
I was in Moscow and spent 3 years in Moscow at the law firm, and then I did go to Chicago after. So I left Russia in 1998 after really was a fabulous experience. Learned a ton. Most lawyers, as you know, or all lawyers coming out of law school, really know nothing. It's all about the practice and learning from mentors, and that's what I did in Moscow. But then decided I wanted to get back to the U.S. and I saw some guys who had gone to Russia and stayed in Russia and married Russian wives and had families, and they had become true Russian experts. And I decided I didn't want to do that. I wanted to come back to America, and decided after about 3 years of practice that if I didn't make that move soon, I was could turn into one of those guys, and I really wanted to be in the U.S. So I came back to Chicago in 1998 and joined another firm called Altimer and Gray, and I really got into mergers and acquisitions. I didn't know how much I'd like that. But buying and selling companies, most of my clients were private equity funds, and so I really learned the art and the way you go about that process, and I learned that I really enjoyed that. I love negotiation. I love trying to have win-wins for my client and the other party, and so I spent the next many years actually kind of perfecting my skill set and conducting lots of transactions both in Chicago, and then eventually I moved to Indianapolis in that would have been 2003.
Okay,
what was that? What was that transition like, going from Russian law or international law, really a focus on Russian legal system, as you mentioned, coming back to the U.S. and not just shifting gears in terms of a legal system, but the kind of specialty that you were focused on?
It's a good question. It was a big transition, and for the first year, I had some opportunities. Some law firms come to me and say, "Hey, would you come back to Russia?" And I almost thought about it only because it was so fascinating being in Russia. I mean, as an expat, as a foreigner, it just every day it was a new learning experience. Every day, and my language skills were getting better. My legal skills were improving, so it was so interesting. And when I came back to Chicago, the first year was a tough transition period, just being back in America, and leaving a place that was just so exciting. But that wore off after about a year, and again, I wasn't doing a ton of M&A transactions in Russia, so I was catching up actually from people that were kind of my peers, fourth year associates basically at a big law firm, who had done a lot of M&A transactions. So I was playing catch up, but worked hard and eventually began to catch on. Okay, this is how M&A works, and this is how you do as a young lawyer, you're doing a lot of due diligence, and you're then eventually you learn how to negotiate and what the more important parts of a contract are when you're negotiating out an acquisition agreement. So but it was a lot of fun because the late '90s, as you guys will remember, was a big business boom. I mean, this is when the internet deals and the pre-dot-com bubble. So I was dealing. That's what Chicago for the first few years really was the leading up to the .com. And when the .com hit, things changed dramatically. I mean, the deals just came to a stop, right? And but I had a great few years of really learning, and I remember pulling all-nighters, and we had a lot of deals. We had some of the first .com deals that we handled that were big deals for that time anyway. Mm-hmm. So it was fun. It was another fun period where I was learning a ton.
And what brought you to Indy in 2003?
So, the longer I was back, I was in Chicago for about 5 years, the more I began to think about a couple things. One was I always knew in the back of my mind that I wanted to get in business eventually, and that while I learned a ton practicing law, had great experiences, had great mentors, I always knew I wanted to get in business. When I thought about where that opportunity might best lie, I thought it'd be a heck of a lot easier, just given what I knew about Indiana, some friends from college, some friends from law school. I thought Indiana would be easier to make that transition eventually. And the second thing was, I had just gotten engaged. I was thinking about a family, and that's a big one, which was, I'm watching some of these partners, my colleagues at the law firm, taking an hour train ride from Wilmette or wherever outside Chicago, and thinking to myself, I don't really want to do that, and I want to be at my kids', baseball game or soccer game, and making that hour trek. And I already knew long hours at law firms, it's going to be hard enough, but having, an hour ride somewhere was not very appealing to me. And I thought, you know what, I know what life's like. I went to law school in Indianapolis, and it's a big enough city where there's a lot of opportunity, to experience kind of bigger city amenities, et cetera. But it also is a small enough where it's easy to get around. It's easy to get to your kids' games and that sort of thing.
I like telling people in New York City where it's 7 ways to Kevin Bacon. Here it's like 2 or 3.
It is, right.
Which is not bad. I mean, so going back to the young kids at IU that you're talking to, like, okay, that adage of don't ever burn a bridge, 100%.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, the upside is literally you're 1 or 2 connections away from just about anybody.
For sure.
Which can be really beneficial.
Absolutely. No, you're 100% right. And it's turned out to be that way for me. And, I had the opportunity to get involved on the political side with a guy named Mitch Daniels, volunteered. So I joined Ice Miller. I was a young partner there, again, doing M&A transactions. And I hear about this guy who seems pretty interesting, who's going to run for governor, and I volunteered and helped in that regard. And then I had an opportunity to come out of nowhere to go and work with him. And again, in the back of my mind, I had an interest in public service. Never thought that I would be necessarily, someone who would step forward and run for office, but I always thought, gosh, if I ever had the opportunity to work with somebody who, had the right things in mind and was doing it for the right reasons, I thought that'd be pretty interesting. And it worked out for me in that regard. Yeah.
Mitch had a pretty good run for sure. While we're all IU guys, when he went to Purdue, I was like, oh man, I have to admit, that's a pretty good get.
Exactly.
And I think, now that tenure is over, like you look at it and like, he
had a great 10-year run there, didn't he?
Oh,
yeah. No, and we're fortunate, I'm like you, I'm a big IU guy, but the experience of working at a high level with Mitch for 4 years helped me really appreciate what Purdue means for the state. Both schools are incredibly important, and we've got a lot more schools that are incredibly important for the state. But Purdue is is quite a gem for us in terms of on the STEM side, and IU obviously has great programs in lots of areas as well. But we're lucky to have 2 Big Ten universities in a state the size of ours.
Well, I'll give you the academic side of Purdue, but if you bring up athletics, I'm drawing the line in the sand right there. So don't even start.
Well, we won't talk about basketball then, will we?
Well, we can talk about basketball, but I think we're going to need to bring a therapist in and get charged an hourly rate here.
I'm one of the biggest IU basketball fans, like you guys probably, but so it's tough. Matt Painter's done a hell of a job there, but I always give my Purdue friends, I'm sure like you guys, a hard time because they get to the tournament and things don't go as well. But I'm knowing that Indiana is likely not going to be in the tournament unless they somehow do something they've never done before, which is win the Big Ten tournament. They've never done it in 27 years.
Yeah.
Although they've had a couple nice wins here of late. Purdue is going to be in it, and as an Indiana guy, I'm actually going to root for Purdue. I hope they make it to the Final Four this year because my poor Purdue friends are suffering, and I want them to feel. I don't know if
I'm a big enough person to go that far.
You're not there with me, are you?
I don't know. I remember watching last year's tournament loss when the opening round for Purdue with a bunch of Purdue fans. And while they left like they were leaving a horrible funeral, the rest of us, the IU fans that were in the room, thought it was Christmas Day.
Oh, I know. Yeah, when I get into these conversations with my friends, I always ask them, how many banners do you guys have in there? And it's always a showstopper, and they always say, oh, you always have to go back to that, don't you?
Right. Oh, yeah. Yes, we do. I will say this real quick. Being a girl dad times 3, I have the last 3 or 4 years have gotten into the IU women's team.
Yeah.
And if you haven't caught a game or just seen it a little bit on the periphery, it's a good product to watch.
Absolutely,
it really is.
And I'm super excited. So I watched. The game against Iowa recently in Bloomington was sold out, and they beat them handily. I watched the one where IU played at Iowa, and where Caitlin Clark, she had a tough first half, but then just started burying them in the second half. I'm super excited about Caitlin Clark coming to the Fever. I mean,
you think the Fever will take her?
Oh, yeah, there's a chance. But I mean, think about
she's on the board.
What women's basketball, what it'll do for women's basketball. I mean, it's exciting for Indianapolis. It's really exciting.
Definitely.
Yeah.
There was some debate whether or not she would go pro or go back to Iowa because of NIL money that she was earning, which.
Oh, did you hear?
That's just like $2 million or something.
How did you hear that she's getting zero NIL money? It's all direct contracts with Nike, Gatorade, State Farm.
So let me rephrase her endorsement money.
Yeah,
which is correct, not technically NIL, but it's not something that you could have gotten just a few years ago.
Right, exactly.
And obviously, then the argument is, well, she's going to get WNBA money, which is not like she's not going to have a money tree in the backyard with that. But the endorsements follow;
they're all going to come.
And her staying, one of the benefits I would think, and this is purely my opinion, as not being a sports marketer, would be her going to the Fever, still being Midwest based, one state over from Iowa.
Yeah.
Same market, more or less.
Yeah.
Just only benefits her.
Yeah, it's gonna be.
But she's
exciting.
beyond the Midwest. I mean, her recognition is. Just,
I mean, she's already got, like I said, Nike, Gatorade, State Farm on board. She'll get more, and it'll be great. As I said, it'll be great for Indiana. It'll be great for Indianapolis. Great for Indiana. My friends at the Pacers always talk about the fact that when you got people sitting in Europe or wherever reading about the Indiana Pacers, beating so-and-so, just the fact that it's Indiana and it's Indianapolis getting the coverage, and she's going to take it to another level. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, I agree.
We went down to a Pacers game a week ago, post All-Star game. I was out of town for the All-Star game, but just seeing, I think it was kind of cool to be, I was out in Colorado that weekend, following what was really local Colorado, but also national media coverage of All-Star Weekend and Indy. And it was really cool to see that perspective versus just local media, because obviously local media is going to be biased about a local market. And it was, talking about just having that exposure. It was pretty awesome to see. And then you come back to the airport, and as usual, anything that Indy organizes is just knocked out of the park. And
there's a lot of pride. I mean, it gives our citizens a lot of pride, right, to see that. And you're right. I mean, it's amazing how the whole community kind of really gets involved when we host Final Fours, Super Bowls, All-Star Game. Now we're going to have this summer. We'll have the Olympic swimming trials for 9 days. It's going to be 9 days of NBC primetime, 8 o'clock. I mean, for 9 days in a row. It's all going to be highlighting Indianapolis. Yeah. And it's amazing what's happened in this community over a long period of time, the last 3-4 decades. But I watched some of the national exposure. I turned on TNT. I went to a couple of the Friday night and Saturday night activities. I didn't go to the Sunday All-Star game. It was just cool, like watching Reggie Miller and Larry Bird, have a conversation. No, it was Reggie Miller and maybe David Letterman. I mean, it was just cool, talking about Indiana days, and it's amazing what sports has done for our community.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Well, it goes back to talking politics, back to the Hud Nut years with the Pan Am Games, which was kind of the
kickoff.
Yeah.
Absolutely, and the way they engage volunteers, I think they said there were maybe 40,000 volunteers that participated in the Pan Am Games. And it really was the thing that kind of ignited, the sports energy, and then they formed the Indiana Sports Corp, which has been instrumental in going after Final Fours. Then they attracted the NCAA to Indianapolis from Kansas City. That was a huge get because that gave us the regular rotation of being the Final Fours. This year we'll actually have Midwest round 1 and round 2 of the men's NCAA tournament coming up this month actually. So. It's pretty neat, it's one of those big city, attractions that we get. We got the Big Ten football championship. Yep. We're in the rotation with the Big Ten basketball championship.
Get ready. So. I mean, you mentioned that the Hoosiers men's basketball program hasn't played in the Big Ten tournament championship since its inception. But let's, IU football, just saying.
I hope you're right.
Championship in Indy.
I hope you're right. I mean, we got a new coach, right?
Yeah,
and I've heard he's very energetic, and is bringing along a lot of his team where he had success. So, we can always be hopeful as Indiana football fans.
Yeah. We'll talk about it at the next tailgate.
Who'd ever thought you'd say, well, there's always football season.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
All right. Well, for all the non-IU fan listeners out there, we'll reel this back in and get back on track. So you're in Indy. You've established your law. Not practice, but your career here. You get pulled into the Mitch Daniels campaign. He's elected as governor. And then what?
So I was asked by a guy named Mickey Maurer, who's a well-known entrepreneur in this community, to come work with him at this new entity that Mitch Daniels was going to create called the Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which would replace the former Department of Commerce.
Was it the IEDC at that? Was it becoming it at that time?
Yeah, there was no such thing as the IEDC. It was the Department of Commerce, and he put forward legislation to actually create the Indiana Economic Development Corporation. That was in early 2005. He had just started his first term. And that's when the IEDC was created. And so Mickey Maurer was appointed its president, and he encouraged me to come and spend some time with him. So I was the number 2 guy. I was the general counsel, and executive vice president was my title. And we went about kind of formalizing the creation of the IEDC, hiring and new staff, and really setting up something a little bit different than had been done in the state of Indiana in terms of private-public partnership, really focused and more singularly focused on going after economic development opportunities, meaning bringing new companies here, ensuring that our companies are here, are expanding here, not going somewhere else the best we can in that regard. And so that's what we did. And so I spent 2 years in that position, and then when Mickey decided he had committed only 2 years to step down, the governor asked me to be the next Secretary of Commerce. So I served as Secretary of Commerce for the last 2 years of Governor Daniels' first term. So I was there for 4 years, and then when I started that job, I had no kids. I was a young guy, and when I left that job, I had one on the way. And I remember going to Mitch and saying, I got to get back in the private sector, and I got to make some money. And he said, you should do that. You're right. I understand. I've been there, and you should do that. And so that's what I did. And I left there, and in early 2009, I joined for a short time. I joined Baker & Daniels at the time, now Faegre law firm, and I had a great experience there for a couple of years. But and really, I was looking for my next opportunity to get into business, and I found it, and with a really good friend of mine who had started a company called Home Health Depot. It was a medical equipment company, and he wanted me to join him, and we talked that through, and we were really great close friends, and we talked about the hazards of being in business with two really good friends, and jumped in, and we spent the next 8 years growing that company, and it was a small company when we started. He had about 20 employees, and it was a small company. And when we reached our height or our zenith with the company, we had multiplied revenue by about 6x, and we had grown from 20 employees to 240 employees, from one location to 25 locations in 6 states. So it grew into for a relatively small business, it grew into a little bit of a complicated animal, and we kind of went into it thinking, let's do this, let's grow it, and one day maybe we'll exit. And we found the right opportunity to do that, and that was in 2017 when we sold that company. Yeah, and then along comes Mickey Maurer, a guy who I'd worked with at the IDC, and says, "Hey, Nate, what are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to look for another company because I love being in business." And he said, "Well, would you take a look or have any interest in taking a look at the IBJ?" Had never thought about the IBJ, knew it, thought it was a great brand. Had been lucky enough to be recognized when I was working for Mitch in their 40 under 40 class, so I thought, enjoyed that. And so I took a look. He said, "Go down and check it out. Ask me any questions. Do your due diligence, and once you've done that, make me an offer for part of the company." And so that's how that transpired.
Interesting. So what was the itch? I mean, you'd been in law for. And then ultimately, the public life and government life for a bit. What was your itch to become an entrepreneur?
I knew it from a very young age, a very, very young age. When I looked up to certain people, it was, people who are doing things quite big in business. So as part of my Russian studies and things in terms of just enjoying paying attention to what was going on globally in Russia, a guy who really stood out to me was a guy named Armand Hammer. And not Armand Hammer, the baking soda, although people confused him so much he ended up buying that company. But Armand Hammer was an entrepreneur who started Occidental Petroleum. But I can remember as a kid, I my kids laugh at me now, but I because I like watching reruns when I see them of Johnny Carson. I remember as a kid watching Johnny Carson and Johnny Carson interviewing Armand Hammer, and I remember him talking about, so Armand Hammer was also a go-between between the Soviet leadership and American leadership. I mean, so he was, personal friends with President Reagan and George H. Bush after Reagan, and he had business interest in the Soviet Union, oil interest, and I remember just a lot of stories that he told from a business and political. So I had this interest not just in the political side and not just in the law side, but always on the business side. And I always, in my mind, wanted to try to scratch all those itches, and that's what I've tried to do is try to learn as much as I can, try different things. I've always felt like, life is short, and try to just learn as much as you possibly can. Try as many things as you can. It's always been my outlook. I don't know where that exactly came from, but I've always wanted to really try. And the more I've learned and more I've been engaged in business, the more I love it. I mean, it does offer flexibility, the opportunity to plan my schedule. I can be as busy as I want, which I probably oversubscribe myself often, but it allows me to also be in control and say, hey, if I want to cancel this week's meetings and go with a good friend or just with my family, go somewhere, I can do it, right? You guys understand that. And so always had that interest. And when the opportunity came with a really good friend, it was like something I couldn't pass up. Yeah.
Did the market have any bearing? I mean, you've gone from law to health, the health industry, and then now to media. Does the market play into that much?
I would say for my choices, it didn't play in a lot. Now, what's interesting on your question is both with the healthcare opportunity and with media opportunity, a lot of people said, are you crazy? Why are you getting into that? And I say that on the healthcare side, at that time in the industry we were in, which was medical equipment company, and meaning, we did everything from, we had respiratory therapists who provided ventilators to kids and adults. We provided mobility products like customized wheelchairs for people with ALS. At that time, Medicare was doing a program called competitive bidding, and they just kept lowering and lowering prices, and it was getting harder and harder to make money. So the people in that industry literally said to me, like, are you crazy? I mean, you're coming in at the worst possible time. We enjoyed like decades of like very high reimbursements, and now they're just coming down, 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 down. So I'm like, oh wow, I guess that it is tough. But the figuring it out piece is what I actually really enjoy. Yeah. What I mean by that is, my partner and I, we had to figure out, okay, well, where are the areas of opportunity? Because there's always areas of opportunity. Anytime I hear, why are you doing this? And it's so challenging. I always think to myself, usually when it's most challenging, there's always an opportunity that people are not talking about. The same thing was media. In media business, people say, are you crazy? I mean, newspapers are dying. Well, the more I studied and the more I talked to people, the more I realized, well, yes, local newspapers, daily newspapers are having a really difficult time. Niche publications are doing fantastic. And I also saw kind of what you guys are doing. I mean, what I also saw, there are opportunities to go beyond what we've done historically. And I think a lot of people didn't really think about that, or don't always think about that. What are the things that we're not doing that we could be doing? And, I've stole Mitch Daniels' philosophy, which is, he always said, my ideas aren't unique. He asked his team, look around the country and tell me things that are working. So the IEDC, for example, he didn't come out of that didn't come out of his this is a new brain, coming out of nowhere. It was actually, he said, holy cow, look what Jeb Bush was doing in Florida. Look what Michigan also set up an economic development corporation. So he said, look around and find the best ideas and tell them, let's adopt some of those new ideas in Indiana. I adopted the same philosophy, both when I was with Home Health Depot and with the IBJ. And in both cases, and you guys probably have an industry association where you go and you hear ideas, holy cow, somebody in California is doing something, let's adopt that. That's what I do, and did at Home Health Depot. Same thing with IBJ. We started this new program a couple of years ago called the 250 most influential business people in the state of Indiana. I thought to myself, why isn't somebody doing that? And I thought, if I don't do that, if IBJ doesn't do that, somebody else is going to do that soon. I thought, why isn't the Indianapolis Monthly doing this? Why isn't the State Chamber doing this? Because I saw LA Business Journal, the LA 500, Dallas Business Journal, the Dallas 500. And one of my goals with IBJ has been to really move us into a statewide platform, which we can talk a little bit more about if we want. But this played right into it, and it's been a huge hit, and it really has helped us with our other strategies, not just one program, but we've really been able to meet people around the state, in Evansville and South Bend that we really weren't connecting with on a regular basis. So anyway, a little bit about philosophy, business philosophy.
Right. So it's a good segue. You alluded to two questions I had written down. Once you made the decision to get into IBJ, two things. What did you see in the business or that industry that attracted you? And what, now that it's however many years it's been, what are some of the things that you have done to change because the landscape has changed, as you just noted? And what are some of those newer things?
Yeah. Well, when I first walked in the door, the first few years, I actually didn't run the company. Okay. I was a third shareholder. But with the understanding with Mickey Maurer that I was going to get under the hood and start figuring things out. I had, after 8 years of running Home Health Depot with my buddy, I was tired, actually. Tired in that the healthcare world is tough. Anybody who's in the healthcare world knows what that means, why it's tough. I mean, dealing with tough diseases all the time and being in people's homes, it was tough. So I was more of a advisor, but I was learning. I was really, really learning. And what I saw when I walked in the door at the IBJ was people, a lot of the team actually, who really were kind of adopting this philosophy that newspapers are dying. And which, after buying a third of the company, that's not really what you want to see.
Right. It's not exactly the corporate culture we need around here.
It's not, but as part of my due diligence, I also realized, there is a huge opportunity here. And so, we made some changes on the management team, and we began to slowly change that culture and understanding of what was possible. We had a philosophy, the company did at that time, that they were afraid to raise prices. And despite the fact, I said, gosh, I'm looking around at cranes in Chicago and New York, and I'm looking at the Business Journal in Cincinnati and Louisville, and they're charging double what we're charging. And by the way, we're doing better reporting. We have more reporters than all the places I just mentioned. And I think people who, subscribe to the IBJ, I think they value it. Just like I value the Wall Street Journal, and I pay like $550 a year, whatever it is, a lot, right, to the Wall Street Journal. But I feel like I can't live without it. I think most of our subscribers have that feeling. And lo and behold, we, and my person at the time who was ahead of what was, audience development circulation was really scared to increase prices. And I said, we can't be scared. I mean, we in order to do some of the invest in things we want to do, we've got to be proud, and we've got to, do what we need to do and be competitive. And so we slowly did increase prices, and we actually combine that with bringing some other people in on the technology side. We actually increased subscriptions by 30% over a few years, and of course increased prices. So, at the same time, though, we're constantly thinking about how do you add value to a subscription. But that's just one example. It really required changing the culture and really trying some new things. The company really hadn't tried a lot of new things in a while. So you've started doing events statewide. We ended up doing an acquisition. A few years after I got there, we acquired Inside Indiana Business with Gary Dick,
right, yeah,
and brought on his team. And again, that was part of the statewide effort to really have one platform that is, and really today we're the only platform really trying to cover the state in the way we're trying to cover it. We have more work to do and more investments to make to be able to do that as effectively as we want to do, but we're on our way. And I want it to be a place where we're connecting the dots for Hoosiers, that, if you're a business person in Evansville and you want to do business in South Bend, that we're a conduit to help make that happen. happen, whether it's relationships, whether it's just news of seeing what somebody's doing, another part of the state. A lot of our companies in the state, want to do business, and we've seen it. Like, we've started doing events around the state, and we see people showing up who are from Indianapolis in Evansville, or showing up in South Bend because they want to do more in terms of expansion in other markets around the state. So it's been fun just to try a lot of new things. I mentioned events. I mentioned this Indiana 250. The list goes on. We're starting a new education event in May, and the focus there is about, I don't know if you guys have been reading about the apprenticeship program that we're really trying to launch in the state. The legislature is working to enhance and encourage more high school apprenticeships at companies. And the Indianapolis Chamber of Commerce also is really focused on this. They sent a delegation last year to Switzerland to really study what they're doing. Companies like Roche, who, this is just part of their culture. And it's a huge opportunity for Indiana, especially being a manufacturer-focused state, to get kids who, may not want to go to college for 4 years, but get them connected to an opportunity. Yeah. And then, the companies like to do the training, right? I mean, we
facilitate a trade.
Yeah. And give them that opportunity in high school to start, learning about accountability and showing up and, being drug free, all the things that you guys know need to be the case to have a solid worker, and the fact that these are good wages, right? And there's, I keep hearing from my friends who are in manufacturing, it's hard to find and keep really good talent. I mean, the talent crunch has been happening, for the last 4 or 5 years now, and it doesn't, feels like there's a lot more needed in that regard.
Yeah, a couple things that struck me there. One, so I'm on the board at Providence Cristo Rey High School, and one of the things that attracted me to that high school was their corporate work study program. So it's not just you're going to class every day like a typical high school kid, but these kids have to have internships that are paired with local corporate partners, where they go to a day a week to get real world exposure, which as a high school kid you're not normally getting, and it runs the gamut from a Roche to a smaller local company, and in a variety of roles, just to kind of helps them determine like what interests them, et cetera. And they wouldn't have that opportunity otherwise in many cases.
It's a great school, by the way. That's I know folks who have been working there, and it's Fred Yakey and others, and it's amazing what that school's accomplished. So good work on the board.
Yeah, thank you. So two things that you mentioned that they're interesting, the 250 of business leaders that you're going to highlight. I guess my question is, how do you determine those, and what's the platform? What are you trying to accomplish with that?
So we have a nomination process, and but we don't get nominations all the time from people in Terre Haute, or because they're not aware of it, or so the process is our editorial group, our IBJ editor Gary Dick with Inside Indiana Business, myself, and a few others from the staff. We look around and find and study. We ask a lot of leaders around the state, like who's really involved in the community, who's leading, whether it's economic development, whether it's workforce issues, education. It's a iterative process where we, one of the main things though that we look for, it's not just success in business. It's which is really really important, but also that they're contributing to the community in some form or fashion. It's a big part of the criteria. So that's just kind of how the process works. In terms of how it contributes to what we're doing at the IBJ, it really has been bigger than I thought it would be towards our in terms of the influence it has on our goal to really expand on a statewide basis, because we're hearing from these leaders what's important to them. We're connecting the dots. We have an event where we invite all these leaders, and they're meeting business leaders that I thought probably would have known each other. I mean, running big businesses in South Bend and Evansville, never have met before. And I hear the feedback from some of these folks who attend our event every year in Indianapolis, and they say, that was awesome because I met some people I've read about or heard about through the state chamber or some other organization, but never really had a chance to meet. So helping connect people is part of what value I think we bring, and those connections often, as you guys know, in business lead to new opportunities, new relationships, and positive outcomes for our city and state. So that's been really really helpful. that combined with doing events statewide. So like when we're just getting ready to kick off what we call our Engage Indiana series, and that's 9 events around the state. And so when we're thinking about, okay, when we go to Evansville, who do we want on? We have a panel that Gary Dick has at the event, and when we think about, okay, who do we want on that panel? Like referring back to I literally open up our magazine. We're in year 3 now, so we have 2 magazines with leaders around the state, and say, okay, we haven't had so and so on our panel. They'd be a great panelist. And the conversations at those events is all around what's happening in that region, from economic development, workforce issues, housing, mental health. We talk about all sorts of things with the hope that dialogue will lead to positive action and bring people together. And the response to those events has been, again, like the Indiana 250, a lot bigger than we had thought in terms of the appreciation for us doing those events. Nobody's doing something similar. So it's they all kind of go together. Not everything we do has been super successful. So that but my view is you try lots of things, see what sticks, and you're sometimes really surprised at what sticks, right? And other times you say, okay, we tried that, and we'll retire that and move on to something else.
Right.
Yeah.
This is going to be a dumb question, but I assume that you look at the university network in the state of Indiana. We talked about IU and Purdue already. Obviously, you have Notre Dame, but then you have Ball State, Butler, Evansville, you name it. I would think that they probably play a fairly significant role because, I mean, you look at the networks that are attracted to each of those in those respective markets. That
for sure
shrinks the state down.
For sure. And in fact, so our Evansville event in April 12th, will be at the University of Evansville. And
it's going to be a purple out?
Probably. And they call him President P because his last name is hard to pronounce, so I'm not even going to try. But he'll be involved. And the same thing, when our event is in New Albany, the Indiana University Southeast, and the new chancellor there, Debbie Ford, will be involved. You're right. You're 100% right. The universities play a huge role regionally in every part of our state. Notre Dame, we'll work with them on an event for South Bend this year. And Purdue, the same thing. We had our event at Purdue last year and planning to do the same this year. So, the universities are critical. It's more than just the university, of course, but as we talked about earlier, we're just blessed to have so many amazing universities for a size of our state, population 6.8 million Hoosiers. We've got our share of great universities.
For sure.
Yeah.
What is, I guess, share the future with us to the extent that you can. What does the IBJ media of tomorrow look like? Yeah,
that's a good question, and we're constantly thinking about just that. What we're doing right now, a podcast, our podcasts are growing in terms of listenership and ideas around, how can we help people and companies support their efforts on podcasts. So that's one small area, but we see doing more events. So we do custom events for some companies, and so we see doing more on that front. Our events are interesting in that they make our relationship with our subscribers stickier. So we have probably a third of our subscribers who actually show up at an event. Like this Thursday, we're doing an event at Blend Cigar Bar, and it's the second year. It's called Bourbon and Brokers, and it's sold out. And really, it's just a networking event that IBJ sponsors for the real estate industry, and that. When we do something like that and it's really successful and people say, last year after our event, they said, can you do another one this fall? And I said, well, I'm not sure we can get it in, but we'll do one for sure next year. And here we are, it's next year. But events are something that have really grown. And when I started at IBJ, I think we did 17 events. This year we'll do, I think, 32 events. So we've doubled it. And so that's an area of growth and opportunity. And again, it helps us be more front of mind. It serves as a networking opportunity. It serves as information, like up-to-date information, what's happening in a certain industry. We do all types of industry events. So I can see that continuing to grow. Mm-hmm. And really, we're hiring reporters for the first time in that are stationed in Evansville, stationed in South Bend, and soon to be Fort Wayne, doing more in-depth coverage locally and regionally. is part of our plan, and that's where we're headed as part of that statewide effort that I mentioned earlier. So I see us continuing to grow around the state and subscribers. I mean, most of our subscribers, I say most, 80% of our subscribers would be Central Indiana, the greater Central Indiana. That includes Bloomington and West Lafayette. But slowly but steadily, I want to see that the numbers grow outside of Central Indiana.
Well, certainly it sounds like the IBJ is less a physical media platform that's reporting on news that's already occurred, and more of you just gotten into really the connector business.
It's a big part of it. It's a really big part of it, and I think it's always been part of it. But it's a realization today that if you're a young professional, right, and you're thinking about how do you advance your career? We want to be a place, and we think we are, but we want to better be more intentional about it. How do we help a young professional coming out of IU, Purdue, Ball State, wherever, to live out their dreams and to be connected to people who are going to help them live out their dreams
and stay in the state.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm a big believer. That I tell my kids, go explore the world, but come back to Indiana. And a lot of people say we don't want them to leave. Well, yeah, true, but we also, I think it helps our state grow if you go out and explore the world and see what other people are doing, and opens your mind a bit and your mindset, and come back and do great things in Indiana. Absolutely. Yeah.
Well said. All right.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Well, we appreciate your time this morning.
Well, it's been fun. Thank you guys for inviting me. It's been a great conversation.
We'll look forward to maybe doing a follow-up in the future to kind of see how that state progression is going and go from there.
Sounds great. Good to be with you guys.
Awesome.
Thanks.
And thank all of you guys for joining us on this episode of the Industrious Podcast. Thanks again for tuning in from wherever you get your podcasts, or if you're watching on the Assessor YouTube channel, thank you for tuning in. Until next time, guys, don't forget, be industrious.